Trainer, Berater, Coach. Genau diese Geschäfte sind durchaus in letzter Zeit nicht die einfachsten gewesen und wir haben uns hier mit jemandem beschäftigt, der sich genau damit beschäftigt hat, nämlich wie man nachhaltig Geschäfte in diesen Bereichen aufbaut. Chris Davidson ist nicht nur selber Ingenieur und im Bereich der IT bereits seit frühesten Zeiten tätig, hat sich auch intensiv dazu Gedanken gemacht, einen strukturierten sowie nachhaltig funktionierenden Ansatz zu finden, welches in dem Tool Speaker Business Builder mündet. Dazu haben wir ihn interviewt. Das Interview wurde in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Professional speaking. Quite a number of our listeners are professional speakers and they might wonder, how do I set up my business in a way that is not only sustainable but ready for the 21st century? And Speaker Business Builder, driven and founded by Chris Davidson, fit for the future. Speaker Business Builder provides you with an online presence fit for the 21st century. Is exactly what he is doing. We have a 5-part series and this is part 1. Hello and welcome, Chris Davidson.
Thank you very much, Niels, for having me.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Now, when we talk about professional speaking, well, how was professional speaking done in the past? You set up a website and then you had a network and then you just took it from there. That's what most people did for quite a long time. And now they see it's not working that well anymore. And in our first part here, when you would start to set the whole thing up and tell us, where should we start? What is, in your opinion, the way where we should start in this part 1?
Well, that's quite a big question, actually, but Let's wrap it up into a very neat, tidy answer, the best that I can do, by saying to recognize that building websites nowadays is difficult. It's difficult because it is more diverse than it was, say, a decade ago. Mm-hmm. When Squarespace and easy website design came along in 2003, there or thereabouts, and designing a website was a fairly linear process then, but it isn't anymore. It's a very diverse process now, and it's infinitely more complex. And so I've been able to identify 5 clear stages that websites go through in their development. And if you like, I could just briefly run through those stages.
What are these 5?
Yeah, so these 5 stages are, the first stage is, I'll run through them and then we'll talk a little bit about them. So the first stage is opacity. Mm-hmm. That's followed by 2 stages of engagement. So we go from opacity to system engagement, then community engagement. Then there's a bit of a break. There's a bit of a fence to jump over, which we'll come to in due course. And we get into alignment, market alignment, and then finally, client alignment. So opacity, system engagement, community engagement, market alignment, client alignment. Those are the 5 stages. Mm-hmm.
So now, in this part 1, what does opacity mean?
Yeah, so let me just preface that by saying, please don't everybody go and rush off and try and read up on these stages, because you won't find them anywhere. Those are my labels. Okay, they're not written up in any academic textbooks. Those have come from me. I've done all my research on my websites. I've thought about it, and I've given them those 5 labels. So opacity. Opacity refers to that state that you're in when you launch a website. And of course, when you launch a website to begin with, of course, nobody's going to find it because nobody knows it's there.
True.
Google doesn't know who you are. Yep. You're a new kid on the block. They're not quite sure whether to trust you or not, et cetera, et cetera. So opacity refers to that state where you're not getting much traffic. Nobody knows who you are. Because you're not getting much traffic, you're not earning much money, certainly not through the website. And so now the difficulty becomes, of course, that unfortunately sites can get stuck in opacity. That's the problem. They never move on from opacity to system engagement. So how would you know that you are in opacity? That's the question, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Well, how would I know that I'm in opacity? Well, I know that I'm in opacity, or I begin to suspect that I'm in opacity, if my site has a relatively small page count. There's only a small number of pages. Now, immediately I know exactly what all the listeners there are.
How many pages do I need?
and how many pages How many pages is the ideal website, Chris?
Chris, so Chris, you are an engineer. I am German. Please give me the exact number which is valid for the next 100 years.
So this is the challenge for us, isn't it? And then people will also say, well, hang on a minute. And they'll quote some tool that's for sale online, and they'll say, xyztool.com, they only have 4 pages. Well, yes, that's true, but they are spending a humongous amount of money through Facebook advertising, Google advertising, etc., to generate the traffic to drive to the site, because the site is there to convert the traffic that they drive to it. Now, that mostly isn't the case for what I call the CATS community: consultants, authors, trainers, speakers. The CATS community. We, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, we go for authority sites. We want to be seen as an authority in our chosen area. That's because we deal in 3 currencies. The CATS community deals in 3 currencies. Those 3 currencies are reputation, relevance, and revenue. Reputation, relevance, and revenue. Now, you don't need me to tell you that a lot of people are hurting on the revenue front right now in the middle of 2020 when we're recording this. But of course, that doesn't mean we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still plenty of work that we can do on reputation and relevance. So going back to opacity, what do I need to do? Well, if I've got a small number of pages, a small page count, I'm not going to get much relevance and reputation through those small number of pages. So the first thing I've got to do is up my page count. Other things that I can look for that would cause me to wonder if a site is in opacity is, for example, if I look at the address of the site, the URL of the site, and I see that it begins HTTP and as opposed to HTTPS.
What does that mean then?
So what that means...
You're an engineer and you have an IT background. Sure. What does that mean for the non-IT people?
It's about website security is what it's about. That little S is about security. And so what that says is that if you have HTTP and not HTTPS, basically it says that your website is not secure to the extent that it is possible, if I'm the server and I'm serving up a website and I'm sending it to your mobile phone or your desktop computer, if it's an HTTP site, then there is an opportunity for somebody to get into the middle of that transaction, into the middle of that sending and interfere with it, right? But if it's an HTTPS connection, then we have a nice secure connection between my server and your device. That's the point.
Does Google care about that?
Google cares a lot about that. Since 2014, Google has been encouraging us, owners of websites, to implement HTTPS. They even said, back in 2014, they even said, look, here's a carrot. If you implement HTTPS, we will give you a minor ranking boost. Well, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
So if you're sitting on an HTTP website, then all other things being equal, Google will discriminate against your site.
Do you know? Is it quite common when you look into the speaking industry? Because I know that you did in-depth research about the speaking industry. How common is it that people in the industry have this kind of secure sites running?
Yeah, well, you would think now that everything I've just said, you go, well, everybody's going to have HTTPS, aren't they, Chris? Well, the answer is no, they haven't, actually. Their answer is, in broad terms, about half of us do not have HTTPS. Half. Staggering.
Yes,
staggering.
Absolutely. Which means half of us will have a Google disadvantage already now, and it's getting worse in the future.
Exactly. And your websites, if you've got an HTTP website, then Firefox, Chrome, the major browsers, they are marking your website as not being secure. Is that what you want your potential clients to see?
Probably not.
Probably not. So and then in fact I'll dig into the results of the survey just a wee bit to say that The precise number in the UK for UK sites is 48% do not have HTTPS installed. Unfortunately, that number is worse in the USA. 56% do not have HTTPS installed.
Is it complicated to get that?
It isn't now. It used to be. It isn't now. But I would like to put in one word of warning, please. And this is important. So listen up, folks. If you find yourself without HTTPS, getting HTTPS installed is a relatively easy thing for your website person to do for you. However, please, remember this, write this down. The magic term is 301 redirect. 301 redirect. You must ensure that...
What does that mean?
It ensures that all of the traffic that you are currently capturing on your HTTP website is transferred to the HTTPS website. Mm-hmm. So if you don't do that, then when you migrate to HTTPS, Google says, "Oh, here's a new website." It doesn't recognize you as being the same website just in
right? So you lose your whole. You might have a successful or a sort of successful website running, and you lose it all.
Correct. So if you've managed to build up over many years any volume of traffic on HTTP, plan that migration carefully. Plan it carefully. It's really important. There was quite a famous incident locally to where I live many years ago of a law firm that didn't do that. And they were at the top of Google for some search terms that were very precious to them, and they disappeared to like the 10th page of Google overnight, over a weekend. You know.
Yeah. Wow.
So HTTP is in. Yeah. So HTTP versus HTTPS is a really important point. And what are the clues? What I have for opacity? Small number of pages, HTTP. I then look for the mobile experience. I'd say, what is this site like on a mobile phone? Is it giving me a good mobile experience? Why would I do that?
About mobile experience. How does Google know even if it's mobile friendly?
Absolutely. Google knows that, and I test that in the digital footprint survey. We test that, and we test it using Google's tools. So we know exactly in all of the websites we've looked at, which is well over 1,100, we know exactly what Google thinks of your website.
Excellent.
And so it's so a poor mobile experience is not going to do you any favors. Why? Because this year, Google, it's taken Google a little bit longer to organize than they first said it would, but they are now implementing what they call their mobile first index project. That means what? That means that by September this year, the only version of your website that Google will be indexing is the mobile version. They do not care about the desktop site anymore. They're just not interested in it.
Excellent. That is very good advice on opacity. Of course, when people now say, "Oh, I already have questions here," I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast, of course. And with the next episode, then we're going to take care of system engagement. So for wrapping this episode one up, I can only say, Chris, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.